Judges at the International Court of Justice have ruled they do have jurisdiction to hear a genocide case brought against Russia by the Ukraine. Kyiv accused Moscow of violating international law because it justified its invasion of the Ukraine on the false grounds that it was to stop the genocide of Russian speakers in the east. A record 32 states gave formal statements to the court. The ICJ also granted some of Russia's objections and also allowed the Ukraine's request for the court to rule that there is no credible evidence that the Ukraine is committing genocide in the eastern parts of the Ukraine. But the court has also noted that it has issued out an order calling on Russia to halt its military operation in the Ukraine, and Moscow has not complied with this order. ICJ Judge President Joan Donoghue rejected some of the Ukraine submissions. Let's unpack this further, bringing international relations analyst Professor John Stremlau to unpack the case further. Prof John, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us here on the SABC at this hour.
Thank you very much, and it's a very complex legal situation, and I'm not a lawyer, but the politics are interesting.
Well, absolutely, Prof. That's why we have you here. Let's jump straight into it. I mean, we know the ICJ had ruled that it will hear part of the Ukraine-Russia genocide case. Perhaps in lieu of what transpired, you could give us your reaction to what emerged yesterday.
Well, what emerged yesterday was the second act of two judgments that the court made last week. On Wednesday, they ruled on a case which has been pending since 2017 based on the complaint that the Russians had violated the Genocide Convention and other conventions by their annexation of Crimea and the two eastern provinces of Ukraine. And then on Friday, they had another judgment, a preliminary judgment, that was to make sure that the question of Ukraine's claim that Russia violated the convention, as you've said, by causing genocide against the Russians in Donetsk and Luhansk, eastern provinces. And in a preliminary judgment, the court said this submission was inadmissible, which is reverse argument that the Ukrainians were making, that they were guilty, the Russians were guilty, accusing them of genocide as a rationale for invading the Ukraine, the independent sovereign Ukraine, and the court just said it can't handle this. But they did agree that they would look into the question of whether or not Ukraine was guilty of genocide, which they have denied and which I think they can prove.
Prof, thank you for that. We did seem to lose you a little bit there, but the line has since become steady again. So let me continue with the conversation. Perhaps also weighing in on a small victory at the ICJ when the judges ruled that Russia had violated UN treaties against the financing of terrorism and discrimination in a different case that dealt with incidences from 2014. Have you got any thoughts on that? I'm asking this because I want to look at the implications thereof from these two rulings and really what it means for the shifting geopolitical landscape as we speak.
Well, it's not going to mean very much because the Russians refused to go along with the call for a ceasefire that was in response to the first case that was finally settled on Wednesday, and then the second case, which is being discussed on Friday, was provisional and it's going ahead. So it's very complex legally, and it's a reminder that the team from South Africa was very clear and did not mince any words in the indictment of Israel, which is a state-to-state. And the Ukrainians were sort of clever by half in terms of asking for a genocide ruling against Russia for accusation that Ukraine was guilty of genocide. It's very confusing.